joining online as well. Good to be with you. We are going to be diving into the second portion in the book of Exodus. Before we do, of course, we always begin with our blessing. So I invite you to join with me as we say the words about kind of enveloping us in words of Torah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah hafok ba la'asok b'divrei Torah yadadai dai 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 yadadai dai 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 yadadai dai 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 yadadai dai dai dai. Wonderful. So we have had a couple of Torah portions before now where we focused on the theme of anava, or humility. But I was having a conversation with Bonnie Leopold, who of course we know is teaching a Musar class for the temple right now. And just remarking how every single time anava, or humility, shows up within these texts, it shows up in a different kind of way with different nuances. I don't know if you've had that experience as you've been reading it, but I think the approach today is going to be a little different than we have the past two times that we've been talking about anava. Okay, so here is our text sheet, and I want to just start with something straight out of Ta'anit, which is the Talmud. Would anyone like to read this?
I'll read it.
I will. Thanks, Steve.
Rabbi Hanina Bar Edi said, "Why are matters of Torah likened to water, as it is written? Ho, everyone who thirsts, come for water." This verse comes to tell you, just as water leaves a high place and flows to a low place, so too Torah matters are retained only by one whose spirit is lowly, that is, a humble person.
Thank you for reading, Steve. And Jessica, I'll call on you a little later. I'd love for you to read then too. Thanks for volunteering. So when we look at this particular text, why do you think it says this, that Torah matters are retained only by one who's humble?
I would think if you're humble, it makes you more receptive to learning. If you're haughty, you think you know it all, basically, I would guess.
Yeah. Do people agree with that?
Well, also, it says everyone who thirsts, and maybe a humble or lowly person is thirstier than a unlowly person. So it means more to somebody who's humble. Like water means more when you're thirsty than when you're not.
It's really interesting. Thank you. Is there anyone I'm missing? I can only see a few people at a time. Okay, but it's interesting. You picked out like two different components, right? About someone who is humble being more open-minded, and also perhaps someone who is humble actually being thirstier for what? Inspiration, for knowledge, for ideas outside of their own. Is that what you were getting to, Jessica?
Yes. And I see someone not humble as in, I'm so humble that I don't know what the words are, but somebody who's in need of learning and in need of receiving Torah. Someone who's thirsty for knowledge That's where that came from.
Yeah, and you're bringing up another question in here, which I think is really what this is all about, right? What does it mean to be a humble person? How do we define that?
Humility.
Anyone want to take a guess? There's no wrong answers here.
You feel an obligation not to take advantage of people if you're humble.
And it's also knowing that whatever gifts and talents we have are not just from us alone, that they come from a divine place.
So it sounds like humility is a matter of being more broad in the way that one perceives the world.
I see it also as being more open to receiving ideas and gifts of knowledge and Torah and things like that.
Yeah, our tradition upholds this idea of humility. It comes again and again and again, right? In so many different places. Moses is the most humble person who ever lived, according to the Torah, right? And we see again and again in our text this emphasis on humility. That's why in the Musar Torah commentary, we've already come to this idea of anava 3 separate times, because it's really uplifted. And I love these ideas being brought in of us being more receptive to one another, of us being able to recognize our place in a bigger picture. Since humility is such an important kind of piece of our tradition, it could also, or the sages in different Jewish texts also warn about the possibility of people who pretend to be humble, like a false kind of humility, right? Have you ever experienced that?
Yeah.
Right? I think all of us have come across that in one way or another, or perhaps we've kind of fallen into it ourselves at one time or another. And so there was this text I came upon. It actually is a Hasidic tale, which says, all my life, this man said, I have tried to follow the advice of the rabbis that one who runs away from fame will find that fame pursues him. And yet, while I run away from fame, fame never seems to pursue me. So what's going on? I'm trying, I'm doing what I should. I'm not trying to seek after fame, but I'm hoping it'll pursue me because I'm not doing it. And the tzaddik, or the righteous man, replies and says, the trouble is that while you do run away from fame, you're always looking over your shoulder to see if fame is chasing after you. So, like, what is he getting at? What's the point here?
You're not really running away from it. That's what he's saying. He's if he's always looking to see if it's chasing, he's not running. He's really more concerned about, is fame after me? Is fame coming? Am I going to be famous?
Seems to pursue me.
What, Michael? What did you want to say?
Perhaps the person that runs away from fame does not want fame.
That could always be the case, but that doesn't seem to be what's the case here.
No.
Right?
It's
Because
the
this
opposite.
person wants fame.
Yeah,
They
it's
just
the
also want to be seen as being humble. Sorry, go ahead.
I would think humility would be non-egocentric, someone who is more open to humanity and less involved in their own ego and well-being.
Yeah, so you're pointing out that here there is a lot of ego in this.
Yes.
My
Yeah.
question is, I know the answer is probably yes, but can performers in the music industry and so on, who are always apparently running after fame, can they also be humble? And
A really interesting question. Do you have any thoughts as to an answer on that, or not really sure?
I don't think they can.
well, it's difficult, but find it.
I think it's,
Oh, I'm sorry.
it's,
Um,
I think we're talking about issues of character here. And I think, I go back to my youth and I think it starts young. And I think, I think if someone starts at a later age, it's much more difficult to achieve this kind of a character trait. And, there have always been parents that, especially in mixed marriages, that, they say, well, we'll let the kid grow up and we'll let that person pick when he gets older. He'll see this, he'll see that, but I think the advantage of growing up connected and then study and Jewish study, and by the time you're a young adult, you've got this, and it's anyway. It becomes part of you, and why would you go through the Torah the same, every year, the same books, year after year, if you didn't want to keep going, and keep what it is about your character too. Anyway, that's what ran through my mind.
Can I add that I also think it's what is your definition of fame here? If it's fame that you want to just be in the limelight because of the fact it's a limelight, or is there another more altruistic reason why you're not necessarily seeking fame, but you want to share something? And so as a writer, personally, I relate to that because I don't consider myself seeking fame, but I do want to share something that is important to me in a creative way. And I try to be humble in the sense that I realize, as I said before, this is a partnership with God and the divine, and it's not just me alone coming up with these creative things.
That's such an important thing to bring in, right? Because humility does not mean you're hiding somewhere. It doesn't mean you refuse to stand up in people or to share your gifts. It absolutely doesn't mean any of those things. So I think that's a really, really important element here. Yeah, go ahead.
I think there's also an element of believing in yourself and in your own work and your own curiosity, and the curiosity that you experiment and you question. You say, oh, hey, I'm open to trying a new thing. Somebody sent me a video recently of a man playing solo guitar, the first part of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, guitar only. It was incredible, and I was so impressed that somebody would even think to take a guitar for a symphony. And it was really fantastic. I'm like, now that is a person who might have gotten fame, but thinking outside of the box was incredible.
I wanted to say something that I happened to get the Saturday edition of the Wall Street Journal, and there's I'm trying to get this picture. It's a wonderful, wonderful article about humility that about Ben Affleck and how he's relatively young man, but and famous, and yet he went through a period of soul searching and also being an alcoholic. Yet he has become so humble in his search for humility and meaning in his life, that with his family and so on. It was beautifully written, and I would recommend it to anybody. It's really, in a way, right on this subject in terms of 2022, and someone who is a famous person in this music industry or movies and such.
Thank you so much for that, Michael. That's great.
There's also, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Jessica first, and then I couldn't see who the other person was, but go ahead. Hi, Irv.
Okay, I guess I wanted to say that I think that there's a time for humility, and then there's a time for the opposite. What's it, arrogance or pride? I think there's some things that cannot be accomplished by too much humility. I think, that there are times when somebody with pride and arrogance and the guts to stand up against things. A humble person won't do that, or can't, at least by my definition. And there are lots of examples in history of science and in, just in history in general. People have the courage and the arrogance to take command and to pick up a weapon and go out there and engage the enemy, whoever. That's a metaphor for a lot of things. So I think that it's okay to be humble sometimes, but sometimes you can't.
Can't a person be both humble and
Yes.
and
yes,
the opposite in their life?
I was trying to say that there is a time in your life. It might be, in the morning you're humble, and in the afternoon you're not. I don't know what that is, but yes, definitely. That's exactly what I was trying to say, and obviously didn't get it across. But yeah.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
You're talking about leadership, and leadership and being humble can go together. You can be a warrior and still be humble and kind and all those things, and still be respected that way. I think most leaders who act that way are better respected. I was thinking down at the lower level. What about teachers, and what about people who are mentors, and people who have impact on other people's lives? Maybe not on a grand scale, or something like industries like with rock stars and that sort of thing. There's so many people who have those character traits that don't have fame at that top 2 or 3%, but someone says, "Boy, I wish I could get that teacher next quarter," or "Boy, have you heard about such and such? How the lecture on this?" Those people are famous too.
Yeah, so I know Bonnie wants to say something, and I really want to hear what Bonnie says. What I want to do before that is to just say, personally, as I've been going through studying the Midot, and I'm very early on in my Musar studies, Bonnie is far more advanced than I am here. But my idea of humility, or what I'm learning through Musar, is I used to believe that humility meant standing in the background. But the text that we're reading for today and what we're going through shows that that's not actually what humility is, right? Humility doesn't mean I need to hide myself, or I need to stay away from any sort of place of, fame is kind of a funny word, but a place of a position of respect. It doesn't mean walking away, because remember, Moses is the most humble person who ever lived, and yet he was the most important Jewish leader in our Torah, right? So then we have to grapple with, okay, well, if that's true, what exactly is humility? Yeah, Bonnie, what did you want to say?
Humility is the beginning of Musar study. And I see Irv is here, one of my Musar students. But humility, has this range from being a doormat, where you're just letting people walk all over you. And the other extreme is like what Jessica was saying about the ego taking over and you're arrogant. So humility is one of the character traits where to find the balance, it really isn't in the middle, it's over a little bit. And when somebody, there are other character traits for leadership other than that arrogance, because it includes responsibility, it includes courage. I'm thinking of what other character traits go with that humility. I am humbled to serve this community and also take responsibility for something without being all puffed up like I'm famous and you can't touch me kind of thing. So I think it's important to realize, I always question this about the fame, because so many times people do volunteer work for their congregations, and then there's a big award, a big gala, dance, whatever, fundraiser, and they're being acknowledged for their volunteer work, which they never wanted to have that kind of fame for. They did it from their heart, and so it's kind of an oxymoron kind of situation where, yes, the temple needs to raise money, and the way they do it is honoring their volunteers, but the volunteers didn't want the fame to begin with. So I don't know. I always have trouble
Sometimes
with that.
they do, and there's nothing wrong
Yes.
with that either.
Yeah.
I know, but it's like, it isn't really fame because it gets turned around to, oh, I'm in a position where I can help the congregation. So let them raise money in my honor for the work that I did. And then when that's over, it's like, well, what am I going to do next? So you don't stop with that. I don't know, but
Yeah.
humility is the beginning of recognizing who we are. And, we don't want people to walk all over us, but we don't want to be that arrogant person. There are other character traits for taking leadership.
Thank you, Bonnie.
That's
Yeah.
enough. Okay.
Jay, go ahead. What did you want to say?
Well, Bonnie just brought up so many great ideas to me. And one thing that came into my head is humility is the balance of all the other traits, of all the other character traits. And if we're balanced, then we can have a little bit of that support that we want to go do, and not really arrogance, but the drive, the initiative to do things, but also the understanding that there's so much more. And when I think of humility, I think of humility as being the balance in our lives.
Beautiful. Thank you, Jay. Yeah, Jessica, go ahead.
I thought of a better word than arrogance, confidence. I don't see a humble person as having a lot of confidence. And there are times when that has to, you really have to be confident or a person has to be confident of their skills and their ability to do something.
So I want us
For
to
example,
hold on to that. Yeah, because I think some of the texts today challenge that a little bit.
Mhm.
Okay.
So I want us to play with that, but it's really, really a great thing to bring up.
I think also we have different roles. We don't have one single role during our life that never changes, that we have many roles that we play. And sometimes you are the leader, you are the person responsible, and other times your position is to be the learner, as you are there to find out something. And that is how you increase what you know, and also what you value can change from time to time.
Absolutely. Yeah, Linda Herman.
Yeah, another element I think of humility really is dependent upon the ability of somebody to recognize all the work that has done before his or her achievement, all the people that were there before that enabled that individual to move forward with his ideas. To say, I stand on the shoulders of others. I think that's really an important element of humility. And regarding recognition, I know when I worked for another charity, it is important for some people to have the recognition. There is no question about it. I recall an incident where somebody's name was left off, and I didn't do it, but somebody else was putting the list together. And this individual was quite upset. But the other positive, if you want to stay humble and be humble about it, the other thought that runs through your mind is it will encourage others who know you to contribute. So that's the accompanying element of all of that, if you're in fundraising anyway. So for some, it is important. So that's my memory anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? There's wonderful things that can come by honoring people.
Yes.
I want to bring us to something a little bit different, just to move us along slightly, because there's such great conversation that's going on here. I want to make sure we can get to a couple of things within this chart, even if we don't get to everything that I put together, that's totally fine. But totally different kind of angle, as I came across this letter that Nachmanides wrote to his son. And he said, I shall explain how you should become accustomed to the practice of humility in your daily life. Let your voice be gentle and your head bowed. Let your eyes be turned earthwards and your heart heavenwards. When you speak to someone, do not look him in the face. Let every man seem superior to you in your own eyes. If he is wise or rich, you have reason to respect him. If he is poor and you are richer or wiser than he, think to yourself that you are therefore all the more unworthy, and he all the less for you. For if you sin, you do so intentionally, whereas he only sins unintentionally. So we may or may not agree with anything that Nachmanides said here, but like, what is the core? Like, what is he trying to teach his son about humility?
Don't feel superior to other people in many ways.
Yeah, it goes back to earlier on, right? Where people were
Yeah.
saying humility is about, being more open.
Mhm.
Any reactions to this?
Well, I have a question. When he says, do not look him in the face, I would think looking people in the face is really important, and it also recognizes them as another soul.
Mhm.
So I don't
That's
really
beautiful.
understand that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that the perspective that this was coming from is like, you would kind of bow before God or bow before a king or someone in a position of power. So it's like treating everyone as if they're in that position. But I love the way that you're bringing in like this Jewish teaching. Every single person is made B'Tselem Elohim in the image of God. So shouldn't we actually take the time to look someone in the face? Like, how often is there someone who's homeless on the street who no one looks them in the face, and how painful that is? So I think that's a really important point. Yeah, Jessica.
What time period was Nachmanides? Where did he live? I'm interested to know what the cultural background for this kind of behavior, telling his son, it's like a survival. Don't look at anybody, keep your head down, don't let anyone know who you are.
Right. I mean, it does. I don't think that's exactly where it's coming from, but it's Middle Ages. This is Ramban. Nachmanides is another name for Ramban.
Okay.
Isn't that what many of the monastic orders did? They always were looking down. As I recall, you saw the friars walking around, but they didn't look directly at other people. Maybe just in TV.
Is he saying don't rock the boat?
I think he's saying take a look at who you're talking with. There's also a cultural piece that isn't in here, which is there are some cultures where if you look someone in the eye, it is extremely disrespectful.
That's what I was thinking of.
Yeah, I don't know if that was the case at that time, but it's possible that that played into it. Absolutely. But these are two very, very different ideas, right? And one, like someone is trying to appear humble, but really is very focused on having fame, having a high reputation, whether it's earned or not, right? And in the other one, it's kind of, in some ways, really self-degradation of every single person is better than I am. So I want to learn from every single person. And I'm not sure either of these is totally healthy, right? I think that they're kind of extremes in their own way. And so the question really becomes, well, then is the kind of Anna that we want? And feel free to disagree if you think that there is an ideal here that maybe I'm missing. Jessica, before you had volunteered to read, I would read this kind of little piece by Joshua Mickey.
Okay.
Sorry.
I want to suggest that core to navigating any uncertain time is anava. Humility is not about lowering one's self-worth, but embarking on a deep understanding of the forces that surround us, shape us, and direct our actions. And an ideal engagement with humility is not surrender, but a willingness to grapple with those absurd forces beyond our control and to proactively shape our reality into the world we seek to build. Key to anava is knowing how to understand our own place in the world. Anava should not diminish our sense of self, but sharpen our understanding of the world to show us that failure is not permanent, but a way of pushing us in a new direction.
Okay, so what is Rabbi Likened is trying to teach us about Anava here?
It's not the same as what Nachmanides was.
It certainly
Was,
isn't.
Sir, can I say something?
Please.
Yeah, what I think, the smartest thing I've heard all week was Ari Melba, and it really sank in for me is knowing what you know and knowing it well, and then knowing what you don't know. And a lot of times people charge in and with ideas and things that are shallow, or with things that they hold to be true that are not true. And that's what this is saying here to me. You're going to grab it, but you know what you're doing when you do it. And really study it. Don't just come in with some harebrained idea or something you saw on the internet or something you lightly believe. That's what he's saying in my mind.
Linda, do you have something you wanted to say?
I was just thinking it's hard to differentiate really what's actually true and what's not. Sometimes you don't know. And I guess it's further study that will enable you to figure that out, but not always. I mean, it's the depth of knowledge that's required for the study that is the issue. It's not a very coherent answer. But
If you look how tyrants control the masses, they use techniques that put stuff in their heads that's not true.
right.
I mean, we discussed this in the past, but it doesn't take much to sway a crowd. You would think that everybody had their own sense of but it doesn't take much to manipulate things. And so you have to be careful. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, that gets to something else that you were talking about, Irv, is this kind of self-knowledge. Like, I think that's one of the most important things here. It's not only understanding something really well that you're talking about, it's also understanding your place within this world, right? Having a deep attunement of self. All of us have things that are our strengths, things that we uniquely have something special to offer around. We have our talents, we have perspectives that are really important at different times in our lives. And we also all have weaknesses. We have areas where we don't do as well as some other people do. And that's okay. That's what it is to be human. But here, humility seems to come from just this self-knowledge. I'm trying to feel. Let's see, to proactively, knowing how to understand our own place in the world, sharpening our understanding of the world to show us that whatever it is impermanent, right? If we truly know ourselves, then if we see a problem that we can solve, it is not egotistic, like it is not arrogance if we say, okay, I'm going to step in and do what needs to be done here. Does that make sense?
But Rabbi, there's also the understanding that we learn from everyone, that I don't know everything. I finished school and I said, I feel like I know nothing, because there's always something else to learn. And so just being in the company of another person is an opportunity to be humbled before them and hear what they have to say and go, aha, I didn't know that, And so there is, and not call it a failure, because in that quote, which is now down here, it's not a failure if you don't know something, because you don't know what you don't know until you know it. And so I wouldn't want to call it a failure, right? Just humility is being open to learn from everyone.
And I think that's part of what Nachmanides was getting to. That's helpful, right? If you view every single person of being of worth, no matter what, then we can actually learn from them.
Mm-hmm. I think the first thing you have to learn from someone is put them on an even plane. I mean, you can't look at someone because of their beliefs. Right now, even it's terrible what's going on. We can't talk to each other. I used to enjoy the give and take. You can't do it right now. But the way to start is to even if you think that person is absolutely ridiculous the way they're thinking. Take something like vaccinations, or take something like the election was stolen and stuff. You know, you can't start with a person like that with an attitude. You've got to get that person down on the same level with you, and before you can share anything, and you have to listen, as you just said, listening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is sometimes like having discussions around things around values as opposed to around those little details can be far more productive, right? So I want to bring in a little bit of Torah here, now getting back to Moses. And I know the wording that was used in the Musar Torah commentary was failure. I think the reason it was used there is because Moses might have thought of what he did as being a failure, but perhaps comes to learn that maybe that's not what it was after all. But let's look at this text. Would anyone like to read these verses?
Sure.
Thank you, Jay.
I have now heard the moaning of the Israelites because the Egyptians are holding them in bondage, and I have remembered my covenant. Say therefore to the Israelite people, I am Adonai. I will free you from the labors of the Egyptians and deliver you from their bondage. I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and through extraordinary chastisements. And I will take you to be my people, and I will be your God. And you shall know that I, Adonai, am your God, who freed you from the labors of the Egyptians. I will bring you into the land which I swore to give to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and I will give it to you for a possession. I, the Lord. But when Moses told this to the Israelites, they would not listen to Moses, their spirits crushed by cruel bondage. Adonai spoke to Moses, saying, Go and tell Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to let the Israelites depart from his land. But Moses appealed to Adonai, saying, The Israelites would not listen to me. How then shall Pharaoh heed me, a man of impeded speech? So the Lord spoke to both Moses and Aaron in regard to the Israelites, and Pharaoh, king of Egypt, instructed them to deliver the Israelites from the land of Egypt.
Okay. So when we look at this text, there's a few different things that are going on here. And this is what was kind of meant by failure, right? God says, go in, go tell the people, go tell Pharaoh, I'm going to let you all free. And the people just aren't buying it. It says their spirits were crushed by cruel bondage. They wouldn't listen to him at all. And Moses, perhaps at this moment, feels absolutely like a failure, because he hasn't been able to get across. And then Moses, what does he say? Says the Israelites would not listen to them. How then should Pharaoh heed me, a man of impeded speech? So he's kind of like he's self-degrading himself, saying, I don't even have a good voice. I can't even speak as clearly as I want to. So how then are people ever going to take me seriously?
Mm-hmm.
There's one more text before I just want to, and I know the word failure might feel really, really off here. The reason I'm using it is just because it was used within the commentary and I want to explore it a little bit more. But I want to bring in one more text, which comes from the Talmud, where Rabbi Yehuda said that Shmuel said, why did the kingship of the house of Saul not continue on succeeding generations? It is because there is no flaw in his ancestry. He was of impeccable lineage. As Rabbi Yochanan said in the name of Rabbi Simon ben Yohatzadak, one appoints a leader over the community only if he has a box full of creeping animals hanging behind him. He has something inappropriate in his ancestry that preceded him, something that embarrasses him, right? Why is that? So that if he exhibits a haughty attitude toward the community, one can say to him, turn and look behind you and be reminded of your humble roots. So what is the connection here? Like, why is this important for Moses's development as a leader? What is this connection between when Moses perceives his failing and the humility that he comes to employ?
Rabbi, I think one thing about Moses is that he was given enormous power by God. And And the fact that he was a humble person meant that he would not be someone to take advantage of that power and use it for his own benefit to advance himself. I'm not sure if I think I'm off target from your question, but that's something that occurred to me.
Yeah, I think it's a really important component of it.
It just occurred to me, I was thinking, why am I seeing this differently at the moment? And I think it's because it's becoming, as I start losing pieces of memory, it becomes difficult for me to speak. And if I feel really tense, I stutter. And I'm thinking, so to me, what Moses says makes perfect sense. He's going to turn over the responsibility of speaking to the more polished speaker, the one who can do that. I mean, this is the Pharaoh. No matter what we think about him, he is the #1 guy, and you want to put your best foot forward, because both Aaron and Moses are being led, as it were, by God. It's like maybe he's also saying, let's put the man who's stronger in this particular skill set first and see what happens. Now, as we know, over the course of this, Aaron drops out and we're seeing Moses.
So that's really interesting. You're taking it in a different direction than this Talmud text, right? It's not so much about having something that humbles us. It's more about what is in the best interest of the people and doing whatever it is. If I'm the right person for this, great, I'll do it. If someone else is the right person for this, great, they should do it. Doesn't matter to me. It's not about me. It's about them.
I think that part that's bold is speaking to me. I think what he's saying there, you only progress by failing. It's a management principle. If you're afraid of failing, you're never going to move too far quickly. So he's saying there, get in there, and if you fail, learn from it, and then go back again. It's anyway. That's what the bold thing is saying to me, and it's a management principle that I learned through the years.
Yeah, just so people know, because I know some of this is in bold and some of this is not. I'll tell you exactly why that is. So the Talmud speaks in a very condensed kind of way, and very often explanation is needed to fill in the gaps. Everything that's in bold is a rough translation of the Hebrew above. You can see there's a whole lot more English than there is the Hebrew. Everything that is not bolded is an attempt by the translators to fill in some of the gaps there to make it a little bit easier for us to understand what's going on.
Moses has never been gung-ho about accepting this job in the first place. And could he be using his speech defect as an excuse, again, to not have to do it?
Good.
Yeah, we see 3 different times where Moses brings up his speech, says, maybe someone else should be doing this. And the question is, what's the motivation behind it? Is he trying to back out? Is he doing what Rabbi Catherine is suggesting and just saying, I'm good for this part of it, but I think that Aaron is really better for this role? Or is there something else entirely? And that, it just depends on how we read it, right? We can all see it differently. And that's some of the beauty of Torah right there.
Well,
Go ahead. Sorry, I thought someone was saying something.
I just, when you talk about impeded speech, anyone discussed the fact that there might be language differences rather than speech impediments? I know in yeshiva they taught me that he touched something hot and put his hand in his mouth and it caused him an impediment. And other things I've read, it was a language difference. Aaron, because Moses wasn't of the people. And he was an Egyptian prince, right? And he moved into another arena. So could language be an issue here?
Yeah, it wouldn't necessarily have been a barrier when speaking to the Pharaoh because he would have grown up in the palace, but it certainly could be when speaking to the Jewish people.
Right, that's what's confusing me.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's, again, something so beautiful about Torah. There's so many different ways to understand it, and each different possibility gives us new meaning and understandings.
It's a real interesting portion, isn't it?
It is. These portions in Exodus going through all of this have so many different layers to them, that's for sure. I had included this one verse in here just when God had promised that the people would listen to Moses, which is probably all the more of that sting when they just were not heeding anything that he had to say, right? And then if we go back to the commentary that we have for this week, Rabbi Joshua Mikidis was talking exactly to this. And I know this is a little bit of a longer piece in here. I'm going to read it quickly just so that we can kind of talk through it. So Rabbi Menachem Mendel of Kutsk noticed something strange in the text and asked Rabbi Menachem Mendel of Warkau about an earlier promise that God had made to Moses. And this is the last verse that we were just looking at. V'shamu l'kolecha, the Israelites will listen to you. If this promise did not come true, can it be the case that God's words have failed to come to fruition? Our second Rabbi Menachem Mendel parses the verse carefully. He explains that the text is very specific to say l'kolecha rather than use bekolcha, that is, to your voice rather than in your voice, implying a looser connection between Moses' words and the people. The text seeks to say, it is your voice alone that the people will listen to, not to the specific content of your words, since at this point the people are too spiritually and physically oppressed to understand the fine details of their redemption. However, even if they cannot hear Moses' words, they can hear his voice. They can tell that in their hour of sorrow and pain, God's servant is there for them. Rabbi Menachem Mendel of Warkau teaches us how to understand our perceived failings. In times of struggle, we might feel that our words fall flat. Moses may perceive himself as having failed in his mission. However, from a different angle, his presence still has a palpable effect. With the right dose of anava, we can see that the results of our work might not be what we expected, but balanced with the right amount of confidence, that word coming in here, in who we are, we can still bring good into the world. Moses' effect on the people is not the anticipated one, but it is powerful nonetheless. So I put a few questions here just to help us kind of think through all of this. And one of them being that the Torah describes Moses as the most humble man that ever lived. How within this, him stepping into this role, how does he display his humility here?
Well, by saying he can't lead the people. Yeah. That someone else should do it.
And he doesn't actually say that someone else should do it. He says that he has problems with speech.
Right. But there's an implication there.
The question is there? Maybe there is,
Okay.
maybe there isn't, right? Yeah, Jessica, go ahead.
I think he shows one way he shows humility is that he does it anyway. He has the faith in God or perhaps in his brother, in Aaron, helping him, that he realizes that to not do this would be wrong. And he was chosen, and he had, in his humility, he realized, instead of charging off and saying, yeah, I'll do it, he went into it with a little bit of hesitation, but he did it anyway. And it's what Bonnie was talking about with faith, I think, as a component of confidence. I think he had just the right amount of mixture of faith and confidence to do it, to pull it off.
He recognizes his own shortcomings and says, even in spite of those, if you're behind me or if I'm representing you, then I will, with humility, do it.
Yeah, because there's a difference between somebody who says, no, I won't do that. I will absolutely not do that, and doesn't. I don't think that's humility. I think that's like
Stubborn.
sort of a little bit of stupidity. But Moses
Arrogance is
says, this is what I can't do. I don't speak well. But there are other things he did very well. So I think that was, I'll stop now.
Yeah, thank you for all of that. Yeah, Michael, go ahead.
So humility is to be balanced with the confidence. I think, that's we've said that, but I think that's the lesson to me. That
Yeah.
I mean, if you're confident and you're choosing to do things and you know the importance of it, but if you can still be humble at the same time and think about your own shortcomings and respect others, I mean, that's the key to living appropriately.
I don't think that confidence is in any way in conflict with humility, though, right? Because if it all starts from a place, like they're not balancing each other, they're working in tandem. Because if we're coming from a place of self-knowledge, these are things I'm good at, these are things I'm not good at, I'm coming wholly as myself. Humility means saying, this is where I am in the world. I can be totally confident in the things I'm good in. I can ask for help on the things that I'm not good in and not feel that as a negative, right?
Mhm.
And so you don't need confidence to balance it. Confidence enhances our ability to be humble.
Mhm. His confidence comes from God.
Mhm.
But how many of us are really aware of our own shortcomings?
Right. And I think that that's one of the most important components of Musar. Bonnie, correct me if I'm wrong, but like, it seems to me that Musar is really about having self-knowledge and working on that self-knowledge so that then we can make choices and live up to our highest potential, be as humble as we can be like in the ways that are most appropriate. Okay. I want to bring in one other thing because I'm looking at the time and I think that this piece is super, super important to bring in. So our commentary for today actually started with this story of Helene Kazay Benatar. I am hoping I am not totally butchering her name. I couldn't find the pronunciation online anywhere. I really tried. But when she was growing up in Tangier, she showed the kind of leadership potential that educators dream of. She became the first Moroccan Jewish woman to receive a bachelor's degree. After learning a law degree from the University of Bordeaux, she became the first female lawyer in Morocco. As if these remarkable achievements were not enough, she could have never known what she would be called to do as the horrors of World War II made their way across the European continent and toward North Africa. When World War II began, she sprang into action. She volunteered with the French Red Cross and encouraged the Jewish community to support the war effort, resulting in 2,000 Moroccan Jews joining the fight against Nazism. When she found herself stuck in Casablanca, she did not admit defeat, but worked with the American Joint Distribution Committee to assist hundreds of Jewish refugees from Europe flooding the city. Embracing her full potential in an hour of need and connecting with the forces of Jewish humility, she dealt heroically with a reality previously unimaginable. At every step, she forged ahead and refused to surrender to the forces and expectations outside her. And this was an example that was used as really that Rabbi Joshua Mikidis used as a model of humility. And so the question becomes, how is she demonstrating humility here? What is she trying to teach us, or what does her life teach us about the soul trait of Anava?
She certainly recognizes that in order to achieve what she wants to do, she does need the help of others who can do things she cannot do, that partnership will create what she wants to have happen.
Mhm.
Beautiful. She was confident in herself, right?
Mhm.
That, sorry, that confidence didn't detract from her humility at all. It added
I
to it.
know.
So I think it challenges us a little bit in how we define humility. It kind of pushes us in a different direction.
Oh, that's lovely. Huh?
I think women should rule the world.
They do.
Well,
We
I mean,
think so too.
just in recent times, look at all the powerful women in the last 20 or 30 years. You know, from India to Europe. I mean, you know, and they're more women use this trait more than men do. I've seen that in synagogue lives, where not people not they're doing it all for the right reasons, but I see where they're bringing their life or their lack of humility shows up sometimes in the way they deal with other people. You know, they treat it like a business, and they, you know, more successful people have been the ladies who have been just as successful, and I think they're doing a better job. Just an opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I think all of us can fall into traps of ego and struggling with humility. I think there's a reason that this is the first trait that we go into, right, in Musar, because it is so central to everything else. In coming across, like in preparing for today, I came across this quote from C.S. Lewis that I thought just spoke to it so beautifully and succinctly, right? True humility is not thinking less of yourself. It's thinking of yourself less.
I love
And
it.
that's exactly what was going on there, right?
Very good. Yeah.
Very good.
So I think if there's a takeaway from today's teaching of humility, C.S. Lewis hit it on the mark, right? He might not have been a Jewish Musar teacher, but he certainly was getting to something that is definitely core in Musar.
Mhm.
So it is 1:29. I almost got to the very end, and that's okay. Actually, maybe I'll leave this. I'll read this piece just because it leaves us with questions for our own personal exploration in the coming week. Practicing Anava may help us to realize that we are not alone when we attempt to change the world. We are part of a story much larger than our own. When we understand our place within the Jewish story that began thousands of years ago, we can hearken back to those who have handled moments of deep pain and difficulty before us and find strength. When we find ourselves in moments of difficulty, a practice of Anava can push us to ask 3 questions. How might my impact be different than expected? How can I find the divine in this moment? And how can the story of those who came before me support me at this moment? I think right now, as there's a new wave of Omicron, we might be in a place where we're saying, this isn't quite what I want. And being able to ask those questions of ourselves might be a really helpful kind of tool for us all.
Mhm.
Any final thoughts or reflections as we close out today's study?
Mm-mm.
We're all deep in thought. That's okay too. Thank you all so much for all of the insight that you brought to this. I mean, this has really been a beautiful conversation. I wish we had more time to keep exploring because I just appreciate learning with and from all of you. Next week, we're going to continue with the story of everything that's going on in Egypt as Moses is confronting Pharaoh. And I hope everyone has a happy new year.
Rabbi Cassi?
Yeah, please.
How about the time change? Do you want to?
Yes. Thank you for reminding me. Exactly. Last week, we had talked about a time change starting in January. I know not everyone was here, so I'm really appreciative for that reminder. We're going to be moving Torah study to 1 p.m. in the future instead of 12:30. I know that's a change. We had started at 12. Now we're moving to 1. The reason is I'm a part of a 5-year commitment with the CCAR, the Central Conference of American Rabbis, to be part of a conference committee. And it is at this exact same time. And I want to make sure I can give all my attention there and also all my attention here. So I'm really appreciative that you're willing to kind of play with the times a little bit. I don't anticipate another time change, but it will be starting next week at 1 p.m.
Thank you.
Thanks so
you.
much. And
Happy
one
New
more
Year.
reminder is that services tomorrow will be at 5 p.m. for tomorrow only, just because it's New Year's Eve. So I look forward to seeing you then too, if you're able to come. Hi,
Happy
everyone.
New Year.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Rabbi.
New Year.
Thank you.
Thank
Happy
you
New
very
Year.
much.
Bye-bye.
Happy New